All right, what's up, guys? Adrian here. So it's draft week. The NFL draft is coming up this Thursday. What is today? Today's Monday. Um, and yeah, I think I'm gonna do a mock draft here. It'll be fun. I enjoy doing these, and I did a lot of research on what players teams like and what players are considered good in the college world that are coming in, and all the needs and wants of teams. So, I'm not an analyst by any means, but I looked at actual analysts and what they did for teams and what they think certain teams want, and I also looked at every team's websites and YouTube accounts and whatnot to figure out what they're thinking about right now. So I think this is going to be pretty good, pretty realistic, and I'm looking forward to see what it's going to look like come Thursday. So let's just get right into it. So first on the clock, yeah, they got 31. First on the clock, we got the Panthers. Obviously, they traded up because they want a quarterback. Um, they've I've been thinking that they were going to go C.J. Stroud for a long time now, but then what was it, like last week or the week before? They came out with the story that apparently they really like Bryce Young. And it makes sense. Between Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud, you can't. I feel like you can't really go wrong. C.J. Stroud has been apparently dropping on boards though, for like an aptitude test or something, and because he's from Ohio State and those quarterbacks usually struggle. But either way, this seems like they're going to go with Bryce Young. So that's who I'm going to go with. The Panthers' first pick, Bryce Young, Alabama. Second overall pick, the Houston Texans. This is where the draft apparently gets very interesting. Because I thought for the longest time, along with many others, that the Texans were for sure going to take a quarterback because it's kind of a huge need for them. And with Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud, most people, including me, thought that these were two great picks. Panthers, Texans, it makes sense. Apparently, recently the Texans have been putting it out there that they aren't in love with any other quarterbacks other than Bryce Young. So if the Panthers pick Bryce Young, the Texans might go in a different direction. They might try to trade down, or they might just not pick a quarterback with this pick because they do have the 12th overall pick as well. And if quarterbacks start to drop, they could take one of the quarterbacks there. And Will Anderson's very good. They could look at him, or somebody else that might love C.J. Stroud could, in theory, trade up with the Texans. Um, most of the teams that would like him are from like their division, like the Colts and Titans. So that feels kind of like it might be a stretch. But although, I mean, maybe the Raiders would jump up and get him, maybe a few other teams. But ultimately, I kind of think that this is a bunch of smoke, even though a lot of legit sources think it's real and that the Texans really just don't like C.J. Stroud. I think it's some sort of smoke so that maybe somebody will come trade up ahead of the Colts so they can kind of screw the Colts over. I don't know. I really don't know. But I just can't imagine them taking anyone other than C.J. Stroud. Really, in my head, it doesn't make any sense. So I'm gonna go with C.J. Stroud, Ohio State, for the Texans' second overall pick, and that drops us to the third pick of the Arizona Cardinals for the Arizona Cardinals. The Cardinals could do a multitude of things here. Well, really, they're only really thinking about doing two things here. They could stick and pick, in which case I would assume it would be Will Anderson, although they might like Tyree Wilson or Jalen Carter or maybe even Christian Gonzalez there. But most likely, and what everyone is saying is they're like desperately trying to trade back. Now, if the Texans don't take C.J. Stroud, the Cardinals will probably get. That's what the Cardinals want. They want the Texans to take somebody else so that the Cardinals can trade the third overall pick to somebody for a plethora of picks because somebody will want to trade with the Cardinals to get C.J. Stroud, and they'll give them a lot of draft capital to do it. That's what the Cardinals want. Now, in this scenario, since C.J. Stroud's off the board. I still think they said that they had 6 people calling them, so I still think they will trade this pick. But they probably won't get enough or as much draft capital as if C.J. Stroud was still on the board, in my opinion. But I do think there's some teams that like Anthony Richardson and Will Levis still, so they should still, or even Will Anderson. Somebody might trade up to get Will Anderson, possibly Jalen Carter. But I think somebody will still want one of the other 2 quarterbacks between Richardson and Levis. Now, if we look at some of those teams, and the Cardinals aren't going to want to trade down too far, but if we look at some of the teams, we got like the Colts might want to move up 1 to make sure they get their guy. The Raiders possibly, or maybe even the Titans. I mentioned them all earlier. Other than that, I mean, maybe the Commanders, but they're talking about Sam Howell a lot, and that's kind of far down. So those are basically the options I'm thinking of off the top of my head. And there's been a lot of talk recently with the quarterbacks. Bryce Young's great. C.J. Stroud has been, for some reason, dropping. Doesn't make sense to me. Anthony Richardson had a lot of hype at the Combine and right after that, but he's been kind of stagnant since then. And Will Levis didn't have a lot of hype at the Combine, but he's been slowly rising to where now there's reports of the Texans possibly even taking him at 2. Now, I don't know if that's smoke. That could be smoke, too, with Will Levis. But, you know, I saw reports of the Colts, the Raiders, and the Titans preferring Will Levis to Anthony Richardson or even C.J. Stroud in some cases. So I am going to... well, in this scenario, I would say that I think the Raiders might be out on trading up if C.J. Stroud's not there. The Titans, I think, might still be thinking about it. I do think they like Will Levis. I don't know about Anthony Richardson. Maybe. They say they do. So I think the Titans would still try. And then I think the Colts, though, the Colts are taking a quarterback. They've made it very clear that they're taking one regardless. So I think they, even though they would get whichever doesn't get picked between Richardson and Levis, I think they make the most sense to me to move up with the Cardinals. And then the Cardinals only move back 1 pick, still get the pick that they want, the person that they want, and they get a small amount of draft capital. So that's what I'm going to do here. So we're going to do the Cardinals and the Colts. I don't really care too much about what they traded because I'm only doing a first round. I just got to get this accepted. So let's see if they accept that. Declined. Yeah, that wasn't enough. Let's try this again. Hopefully this doesn't take too long. I'll just give them a first. How about that? They'd have to accept that, right? Yeah, okay. So we got the Colts moving up 1 pick. And now it really depends on if you think they'd want Richardson or Levis. At the moment, they're saying that they like Levis a lot better. And I personally believe this just simply because Levis seems like the guy that doesn't have to sit and wait forever. And the Colts kind of need somebody to come in and play good at quarterback. Whether that, I mean, Gardner Minshew could play for a little bit, but my cat's playing. Sorry. Gardner Minshew could play for a little bit and do good, but ultimately they're going to want the rookie to play if they're picking him up this high. And I think Will Levis makes more sense than Anthony Richardson in this case. So I'm going to go ahead and pick Will Levis. Will Levis at number 3 to the Colts. What you doing? What you doing? She never plays with that until I record, of course. Now we go on to the Cardinals. They're happy. They just got some draft capital. They moved down 1 pick, and all of the top defensive players are still on the board. I think this will be relatively easy. I think this will be a pretty easy pick for the Cardinals, and I think they will go Will Anderson, edge out of Alabama. And I think they'd be very happy with that. And that takes us to the Seahawks. So the Seahawks definitely are... I don't think they expect Will Anderson to be there, but I think they're hoping that Will Anderson drops to them at 5. But I think they would also be happy with some of the other options on the board still. They could go Jalen Carter, D tackle. They could go Tyree Wilson, edge. Christian Gonzalez, and even Devon Witherspoon. I think they could go any of those guys, really. Um, I personally think, Jalen Carter's been dropping on boards because of his off the field issues, but I really think the Seahawks would take him quickly. I think they would love Jalen Carter, and that's what I'm going to go for them. Jalen Carter, D tackle out of Georgia to the Seahawks. Now, the Lions are up at pick 6. They are pissed right now that Will Anderson and Jalen Carter both went right ahead of them. They're definitely hoping that one of those two drop, I think. But there's also Tyree Wilson on the board, and I think Tyree Wilson is, I think he's number 3. I think he's a clear number 3 for the D line, right after Anderson and Carter. And you could make a case that he's higher than Carter, and some people say that he's higher than Anderson. So I think he's a great pick, and I think the Lions could pair him and have a monster of a D line next year. So I'm going to go with Tyree Wilson, edge out of Texas Tech, to the Lions to create absolute havoc in the future. And I think the Lions would love to take him there. And that takes us to number 7, which is the Raiders. So the Raiders, this pick's a little interesting, and somebody could, in theory, trade up for Anthony Richardson by now, but I really do think he might fall a little bit because I think he's just so unproven. Like, he has impressive frame and a cannon arm, and he makes crazy runs, but he did not have amazing stats. He didn't. And he had such terrible throws sometimes and poor decision making that I think a lot of teams are going to be really scared to take him this high when there's other talent on the board they could take. So I really do think he's going to drop. Whereas earlier this month, people were saying definitely top 5, you know? So the Raiders, they could take Richardson. And honestly, that wouldn't be a bad pick because he could sit behind Jimmy Garoppolo and Brian Hoyer and learn behind them. But I think he would be. I just think he'd be a bad fit for the Raiders in general, simply because I don't trust their coaching staff to coach him up. Now that doesn't mean they won't take him, but I don't think they're going to take him. I think they'll be looking at other options on the board, and there are 2 clear options in my mind that they would be looking at. And now, in theory, they could look at one of like Paris Johnson, maybe even Broderick Jones, Miles Murphy, maybe. But I think Christian Gonzalez and Devon Witherspoon are more obvious picks here. I just think that they're a step above. And between the two, Christian Gonzalez might have a higher ceiling, but he's also a little less proven, whereas Devon Witherspoon, I think, is basically a plug-and-play guy from what I've looked up. So I think the Raiders would love to pick Devon Witherspoon with this pick. And now it says 12 overall, so this could be a slight reach here, but in reality, I don't think it is at all. I think there's a very good chance he goes this high. So Devon Witherspoon, cornerback, Illinois, to the Raiders. And that brings us to the Falcons. Now, the Falcons could also be an Anthony Richardson pick. Before any of the combine or anything started happening, I thought the Falcons would for sure be looking at quarterbacks at 8 overall, but they have made it abundantly clear that for some reason they want to go with Desmond Ridder. Or maybe Taylor Heineke, but they've been saying Desmond Ridder. Excuse me. And I believe them. I think they want to shore up their defense and possibly fix their O-line a little more, even though they did okay last year. I think that's really what they're thinking, and I kind of think that's a mistake for them as well. But that's what I think they're going to do, so I think they're going to pass on Richardson here. And they could go a few different directions with like Miles Murphy or maybe even Nolan Smith. They're high. I think this is a little too high for Branch or any of those guys. Lucas Van Ness has been up here a little bit, Joey Porter. But Christian Gonzalez, I think, makes perfect sense for the Falcons. He could come in and compete and start and possibly be an amazing corner for Atlanta for a long time. So I think they would love to get Christian Gonzalez here at pick number 8, cornerback out of Oregon. And that takes us to the Bears. The Bears, well, they're not going to go quarterback. They could go Bijan Robinson. I don't think they're going to, though. Most of what I've heard about the Bears is that they're really looking at taking the first O tackle off the board because they need a starter, basically. They've had terrible luck on their O line. So I think they're probably going to be looking at Paris Johnson, Broderick Jones, and Peter Skoronski. Probably not Darnell Wright. So Skoronski is projecting as a guard, and I think they're looking at more of a tackle. So I think it's more between Paris Johnson and Broderick Jones. And while they could go Broderick Jones because he has a very high ceiling, it's almost similar to the Witherspoon Gonzalez differences, whereas Paris Johnson just seems like he's a more ready to go prospect right off the bat, whereas Broderick Jones might not be. He might struggle more. So I do think they would love either of these guys, but I think ultimately this is almost a locked-in pick of Paris Johnson Jr. I'm pretty confident about that one after looking at all the analysts and what the Bears need and everything. I think that they are pretty much going to pick Paris Johnson Jr., PJJ, O tackle out of Ohio State. And then that brings us to the Eagles. Now, the Eagles, after the Cardinals, are probably one of the bigger trade-down candidates. Now, the Falcons could possibly trade down. I've heard that as well. I don't think they're going to. The Eagles love trading, though. Howie is a trader. He loves trading every single year on draft day. He's making moves. You see it every time. I think they definitely could trade, especially if someone wants to jump ahead of Tennessee for Anthony Richardson, possibly. I think that's a gigantic possibility. But that's not where I'm going. That's not what I'm doing for the Eagles, because where they've been projected to trade down a lot of the times, they also seem to be absolutely infatuated with one individual in this draft in particular. And I'll give you a second to think of who that is. Yep, it is, in fact, Bijan Robinson, running back out of Texas. The Eagles apparently love this guy. Based on everything I've looked at, they want Bijan Robinson. And they could wait to see if he drops to them at 30, or possibly, pick somebody else like Myles Murphy or Nolan Smith, or maybe one of the tackles here, and then maybe try to trade up. But I think that they like Bijan Robinson so much that I think that they actually will take him at 10th overall. And I think that'd be great for Bijan. I think he deserves it, and I think he should be a top 10 pick. He is probably the most talented person in this draft, possibly behind Bryce Young or Will Anderson. But he's amazing, and I'm a Giants fan. I would absolutely hate this pick, but I know Eagles fans would love it. A lot of them would, at least. And I think he would... That would be the most dangerous offense in the NFL, probably, if they draft Bijan Robinson. Because they have everything. They have a great quarterback. Bijan would be a great running back. They have a couple great receivers. I'm not sure who their tight end is anymore without Goddard, but they could fix that easily. And then their O-line's fantastic. I think this is, in my opinion, this is kind of a no-brainer, because it's just amazing, an amazing pick. And that's what I'm going with. Bijan Robinson, 10th overall to the Eagles, running back out of Texas. Oh, I hate that pick so much. And then we get to number 11 with the Tennessee Titans. And this might not be how the draft shakes out, but I think the Titans would absolutely love it if it did shake out like this. Because this is an outstanding problem for them to be looking at. Anthony Richardson, who they're talking about trading up for, or a tackle like Broderick Jones or Peter Skoronski, maybe Jackson Smith-Njigba, possibly one of the edges. I don't think so personally, but possibly they're there. Maybe even Jordan Addison. But I think the Titans fans would absolutely love it if the draft shook up like this. And I think the Titans would probably take a while to make this pick, but ultimately I think that they won't be able to help themselves. And they're going to go with Anthony Richardson. They're going to stop Anthony Richardson's slide. Richardson probably thinks he's going in the top 10. Titans are going to take him 11 overall. Quarterback out of Florida. And this is a good landing spot for Anthony Richardson, too. Because at 11 overall, he doesn't have quite as much hype as, like, top 4. He needs to sit and learn. And Tannehill is there. He can sit behind Tannehill, learn a lot from him. Hell, he could even learn from Malik Willis a little bit. I like Malik Willis too, so this is unfortunate for him. But there are reports that the Titans are already out on Malik Willis, unfortunately. And I think Richardson could come in here and kick ass, learn a lot, and then next year, Pat Mahomes style, take over and see what he's got. And they could trade Malik Willis too if this happens in this scenario. I'm not sure if they would, but somebody might want to try him out. You never know. But I think this makes a lot of sense, and I think the Titans would be happy if Richardson just fell to them and they didn't have to trade up at all. And that brings us to the Texans at number 12. 12 overall. They could go in a few directions. I know they do want an edge between, like, Murphy and Smith are still on the board. Van Ness, maybe. I don't think they're going to go tackle. They could go receiver as well. Now, we had them pick C.J. Stroud, which, it might not happen. I have it happening here, though. I think they would absolutely love to pair somebody with C.J. Stroud in the first round. A lot of teams like doing that, whether with an O-lineman to protect him or with a receiver or maybe tight end to give him a weapon. And I think that's what the Texans are ultimately going to do, especially since the edge class is like so strong. They could get somebody in the second round that's still pretty good. So I think they're going to look at the receivers, and they could go Jordan Addison. They could even go where is he? Zay Flowers. He's pretty far down there. But Jackson Smith-Njigba just seems like the top receiver on most people's board. And yeah, I believe he missed most of last season. So, you don't have a lot of tape on him from last year, but he was a phenom the year before. He was amazing. And this is kind of a weak top tier receiving core or receiving draft class. But Jackson Smith-Njigba could be a perennial Pro Bowler. And I think the Texans would love to have him. I mean, they either lost or they're losing Brandon Cooks. I don't remember if they actually traded him yet or not. But Jackson Smith-Njigba would be a great weapon for Stroud or Case Keenum, and I think they would. Make that pick here. It makes too much sense. And then we get to the Jets. Oh yeah, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Ohio State. So yeah, and that'd also be C.J. Stroud's receiver. So they have a great repertoire already. So it'd kind of be like Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase style with Stroud and Smith-Njigba. I think that'd be a great draft for the Texans. Yeah, and then we get to the Jets. Now, obviously, they're going to want to make the trade for Aaron Rodgers. So, in theory, this pick could be involved. I don't think the Jets will trade it straight up for Rodgers. I don't think they want to do that. I don't think they will do that. I think that's probably most of the hang-up on what's going on right now. But I do think, and I saw it somewhere, I don't remember what article I saw it on, but the Jets could give up like their second rounder, maybe some picks next year, and then possibly do like a pick swap, like 13 and 15. It's a very small pick swap, so I don't think the Jets would be opposed to it. And the Packers like get ahead of the Patriots. The Patriots might take a receiver. Maybe the Packers want to do a receiver and they want to do that, or an alignment, whatever. So I could definitely see the Jets and Packers swapping these two picks. But since that hasn't happened, and I'm not really projecting that to happen, though I do believe it could happen, I'm going to leave it as it is and have the Jets pick in here at 13. They could go a few different directions. Now, we're going to assume they're going to have Rodgers. So, and there's not any, I mean, unless Hendon Hooker you're looking at, they wouldn't go Hendon Hooker at this point. But I don't think they'd go receiver either because they have their guys, and Rodgers typically doesn't like rookies anyway. They could go edge with Murphy and Smith on the board here. Brian Branch, he's probably in play up at this point, but I don't know if they're really gonna consider him. Deonte Banks, maybe. Joey Porter Jr. They could look to pair Sauce with somebody, but or maybe a tight end. I don't know who their tight end is. I think this is a little high for one of the tight ends, though. Ultimately, I think it pretty much comes down to O line, though, because they've had a rough time with their O line. The big man that they drafted a couple years back has been struggling with injury mostly, and I think especially with Aaron Rodgers' age, they're going to want to add a big man to the group. So we got Broderick Jones and Peter Skoronski. They might even consider Darnell Wright. That's pretty much, yeah, I think that's it. Um, I think they definitely could go Peter Skoronski because he could play guard, possibly tackle. Probably not left. I think he'd probably play right tackle, right? Let's see what they say real quick. Uh, yeah. But he's mostly projected as a guard. I think they would love Broderick Jones here at 13, though. Broderick Jones could be amazing for them. He's got a slight bust possibility, but he could be absolutely amazing for them. And they probably wouldn't have too much of an issue with their O line if they get Jones here. I'm sure they're hoping that Paris Johnson is here, to be honest. But Broderick Jones would be a great pick, and that's who I think in this if this situation pans out like it is now, I think the New York Jets at pick 13 would go Broderick Jones, tackle out of Georgia. I think they would like that pick. I think Aaron Rodgers would like that pick. That takes us to the Patriots at 14 overall. The Patriots are always a confusing team come draft time. Belichick doesn't give a shit what anyone thinks. He takes who he thinks he can plug and play. That's basically his motto. Last year, nobody thought Strange, I think that was last year, nobody thought Strange would be a first round pick. Belichick didn't give a shit. He picked him and plugged him in. And it's not going well. But, yeah. So this year, and I was watching Patriots, one of their YouTube channels, and they were talking about how they have, they could go with like somebody like Peter Skoronski on the O line. That'd be a great pick. Darnell Wright, Brian Branch. But one of the guys was saying that usually what Belichick seems to do is he finds a hole on the team and he plugs it. And he was like, the biggest hole on this Patriots team is cornerback. So that's what the Patriots are going to do in the first round. They're going to find a corner to plug into the hole. Because I'm pretty sure, I don't remember which player it was, but one of their top corners retired this year, I'm pretty sure. And I think they would love Witherspoon if he dropped to him. But in this scenario, he doesn't. So if I go down and look, they could go Brian Branch. He could play corner. But I think Deion Banks or Joey Porter Jr. are the more likely options, because they're straight corners. And I can't remember which one's which, to be honest. Yeah. So Deonte Banks is quite an athlete. He's got a bit of a learning curve probably. And Joey Porter, they're both solid. They're both solid. They both should be solid corners. I think they would like either one of them. Now he might like the Joey Porter connection to his father. He didn't play for the Pats as far as I know, but Belichick might like family line. So I could definitely see him going Joey Porter. But I think Deonte Banks makes a lot of sense here, and that's what I'm going to go with. I think the Patriots, and it's apparently, according to this website, it's a small reach, which Banks could fall. He could fall to like the 20s for sure. But I think it makes a lot of sense for him to be here at 14 and go to the Patriots, corner out of Maryland. And that brings us to the Packers at 15. So let's say they traded Aaron Rodgers. They probably got an extra second round pick. And they're looking at this pick and they're like, what are we going to do? We have a new quarterback, unproven. We want to make sure he thrives. So if we're looking on the board, they probably want to go offense, in my humble opinion here. They could go Murphy or Nolan Smith, possibly. But I think they're going to go offense to give their new quarterback, all the help you can get. And so if we look at this, we got Peter Skoronski, Darnell Wright, Jordan Addison, Quentin Johnston. I don't think they'd take him. They could go tight end, Dalton Kincaid or Michael Mayer. Maybe Zay Flowers. And those are pretty much the options I'm looking at here at 15. And I definitely think that they'll consider a receiver. And I think it'd be hilarious if they got a receiver. I think if Smith-Njigba was on the board, I think they would take him at 15. I think the Packers would take Jackson Smith-Njigba. And Aaron Rodgers would be like, what the heck, guys? It'd be kind of funny. But since he's not on the board, and I do think they could take Addison or Flowers, but ultimately I think they're going to end up going with O-line. And Skoronski, in my opinion, makes a lot of sense. He can move around, play a couple different positions there, and the Packers like their big men up front. So I'm going to go Peter Skoronski, tackle out of Northwestern, to the Packers at 15 overall. That takes us to the Commanders at 16. So we still have Murphy and Smith on the board. And they could go O-line. Brian Branch is an option. Lucas Van Ness, he's been projected to go a lot higher than this in quite a few drafts. Joey Porter. I don't think they'd look at the tight ends, really. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I don't think they're going to look at receivers either. They have some solid ones. So I think they'll look long and hard at Myles Murphy. And some of the other guys I just mentioned, maybe Joey Porter. But ultimately, I think they miss when they had Trent Williams. And I think they're going to look at Darnell Wright, a tackle out of Tennessee. He's a big mover. And, he hasn't exactly proven himself to be an amazing tackle, but all the signs say that he could be a perennial Pro Bowl. He could, maybe not Trent Williams, but he could end up being an amazing tackle if he gets the right coaching. And I think the Commanders would absolutely love to have him. So I'm going to go Darnell Wright, tackle out of Tennessee, to the Washington Commanders. Now, you see there's a bit of a run on the tackles here, starting with the Bears. Bears, Jets, Packers, and Commanders. The tackles are flying off the board now. It's 3 out of 4 picks right there. So some teams could be looking to trade up. They could have been for Darnell Wright or Peter Skoronski. But maybe if someone really likes Anton Harrison or DeJuan Jones, although this is a little high for them, above 20. The 20s might be high for them, to be honest. But people could start looking if they're like starting to go into panic mode. because they need a tackle, they could start looking to trade up. But anyway, we get to the Steelers here. And the Steelers could go in a variety of different directions. I think they would take a long look at Brian Branch and maybe an edge, since there's so many here still. But I just don't see how they would pass on the legacy of Joey Porter when they could actually use a corner too. I think Joey Porter is like the perfect pick for the Steelers here at 17. And if he's on the board, I think it makes way too much sense for them to grab him. And so that's what I'm going to do. Joey Porter Jr., corner out of Penn State to the Steelers. And I think Joey Porter would love that. I think Joey Porter Jr.'s dad, Joey Porter, would love that. I think the Steelers and Steelers fans would love that. I think that's a great pick. And that takes us to the Lions. This is their second pick. So we had them take Tyree Wilson, edge out of Texas Tech, at 6 overall. The Lions are probably, they're happy that they took Tyree Wilson because he looks like he's going to be a beast. I'm sure right now they might be kind of kicking themselves a little bit because you still got Murphy and Nolan Smith on Lucas Van Ness all on the board, and even Foskey and some other guys. Like, they could have gone with like Gonzalez or Witherspoon here and taken an edge later on. But that's not how the draft worked out for them. Would they double up on edge? I highly doubt it. That wouldn't make much sense. But, the option's there. Could they go receiver? Definitely. They definitely could. They just lost like three or four receivers to suspension because of sports gambling, sports betting. So I think that definitely might change what their idea. They could look at Jordan Addison or Zay Flowers, maybe Quentin Johnston here. But I think that this draft, based on what I've been reading, I think this draft, the Lions are trying to cement their defense as one of the better defenses in the league. They already got an edge with Tyree, who's going to be a monster with Hutch already there. And now at this point, they could go Brian Branch for sure. I think this is high for Ringo, even though it says 24. Bresee, he's got a few too many issues with injury. They could go for him, but I don't think they will. They could. Trenton Simpson, probably not. Kalijah Cansey, possible. Cam Smith, I don't know. Yeah, if they go defense, I think Van Ness. No, sorry, not Van Ness. I think Branch or Kalijah Cansey are realistic options for them here at 18. And I do like Brian Branch, but I think after picking a D lineman already and thinking how good it's going to be, I think they would absolutely love Kalijah Cansey. He's a little small, which is why he's huge dropping. Otherwise, he's a monster. So he could struggle with some bigger O-linemen, but he's a little tank. And he's not little. Like look at that, 6'1", 281. That's not small. That is not small. But for a D tackle, that's a bit small. But the Lions, I think, would love this dude. I think he's the right type of guy for a Dan Campbell team, to be honest. Biting kneecaps out there. But yeah, Kalijah Cansey, D tackle out of Pitt, going to the Detroit Lions at 18, and that would make their defensive line a force to be reckoned with. Absolutely it would. Like, who is going to be running on the Lions with Tyree Wilson, Kalijah Cansey, Hutch? Yeah. They got some guys. So I think they would like that pick. It's a bit of a reach according to this, but I could see it happening for sure. And they could trade down, possibly. If they wanted to get somebody else later on, maybe. But yeah, that's what I'm going with. And now here we go to the Buccaneers at 19 overall. And honestly, a lot of teams were talking about wanting to trade down in this draft just because there's so much talent. Like a lot of people are saying that pretty much after like the top like 12, 13, 14 picks, like 15 to like 40 overall is just solid talent. So a lot of teams are like, why am I going to pick way up here if I could trade down to like the late 20s or 30s and still get a really good player? So it makes a lot of sense that people are going to be wanting to trade down, but you're going to have somebody that wants to trade up in that scenario too. And there's not too many teams, I think, that would be wanting to trade up for one of these guys when they are also seeing that, people are going to be falling to them that are very talented. So I don't think there could be trades. There could be quite a few trades, but I ultimately don't think there's going to be too many just because there's so much talent. So yeah, the Bucks could look to trade down, but I don't think. No, honestly, the Bucks are a really good one to trade down, in my opinion, because here, let's see what it says for needs for him. Quarterback, they're not going to go for one of these guys. Maybe Hendon Hooker, doubt it. Edge, they could go Murphy or Smith. Corner, they could go. I don't really like any of the corners. Corner, Cam Smith. I don't know. I don't really like any of the corner. Forbes, maybe. Um, Guard and running back. Yeah, there's not a lot of great options unless they want to go edge here. But I think they kind of want to go offense because they struggled a lot with Brady last year and they lost some O linemen. Their receivers are still solid. They could use a running back, um, tight end. They have spots that they want to fill. So I could definitely see them trading down here. It makes a lot of sense. But there was also a run on tackles earlier. And like I said, teams could be looking to trade up for a tackle if they believe in Anton Harrison or DeWand Jones specifically. Um, yeah, pretty much just those two. Who else is there? Cody Mock, he's in more of a guard. Yeah, so pretty much just those two are left that could possibly be first round picks. So people might be wanting to trade up, and I think the Bucks really want a tackle in this draft or no lineman of some sort. And so they saw these guys go off the board. Would they really want to risk trading down and losing the next two guys, the next two top guys? They might. They could see Anton Harrison as like maybe going in the late first, so they could try to trade down with one of these guys for a small amount. Possibly, I could see it. Maybe the Giants want to trade up and get a receiver. Uh, in theory, but I'm gonna have them stick and pick, and basically picking between Jones and Harrison. I think Harrison makes a little more sense, and that's who I'm gonna go with. Bucks fans might not like that pick. I'm not sure, but ultimately I think that is a realistic possibility. Anton Harrison, tackle out of Oklahoma to the Buccaneers, and I think I also don't trust the Bucks coaching staff now that Arians is gone and Brady. I don't trust them at all. But adding someone on the O line, I think, would be the first step to being able to trust them realistically. And they still have a very talented offense, honestly. They just got to put it together. I don't trust the coaches. I don't. But that takes us to 20 overall with the Seattle Seahawks. So the Seahawks could go in a variety of ways. They could look at Hendon Hooker, realistically. There's been reports about them like they like Geno, they paid Geno, but they could also still be looking around for possible upgrades. And they could like Hendon Hooker. I don't think that's the direction they're going to go. They could definitely go edge here. The edges are dropping. Myles Murphy and Nolan Smith could go in the top 15. And they're still on the board here. So they could definitely go edge. They could look at Brian Branch. They could look at receiver. I don't think they will, but they could. The corners, if they're not off the board, they could look at them. Tight end, maybe. I think the Seahawks would actually be ecstatic, though, if Myles Murphy's still on the board here. And I think they're going to stop his drop. I think this is where Myles Murphy is going to end up going, in this particular scenario at least. It makes a lot of sense. The Seahawks would probably be actually relatively quick to make this pick, I think, if they saw Myles Murphy falling. Somebody could trade up for Myles Murphy. Honestly, he's very talented. Some teams do think he's a top 15, possibly even top 10 talent. I saw the Falcons thinking about taking him or Nolan Smith or Lucas Van Ness. So I think it makes a lot of sense. Seahawks stop the fall, edge out of Clemson. That leaves us with 21 overall. San Diego Chargers. Oh wow, San Diego. L.A. Chargers. I wish they were San Diego. No business being in L.A., no offense. But L.A. Chargers at 21. Now, they really wish that Bijan Robinson was on the board still. I think this is a great spot for Bijan Robinson. The Chargers would really want him. But he's not. So we look at what's on the board. They could go edge. They could go safety, receiver. Maybe tight end. I could see Kincaid. I could see that. But, yeah, I think the Chargers are looking to upgrade their offense this time around. They have a defensive head coach, but their offense is underperforming. Justin Herbert's a monster, but they're just not winning the big games that they should be winning. So I think they're going to add a weapon to the offense. And I think that could be Kincaid, could be Michael Mayer, could be Jordan Addison, could be Zay Flowers. I really think Quentin Johnston's dropping. I don't. I think a lot of teams don't think he's like a top 25 talent. So I think he will be dropping. But so I'm not gonna really consider him too much here. But I think, and tight end, while I do think they will look at him, I think they're going to want a receiver ultimately if Bijan's not here. And I think that could be Zay Flowers or Jordan Addison. Now, they're slightly different. They're both very fast home run hitters. Zay Flowers can score anytime he wants. Jordan Addison, he's a little undersized, but he is extremely fast. I think they would do great with either one of these guys. But ultimately, I mean, look, Jordan Addison's from USC. He went to USC. That's basically it's basically a hometown talent right there. I think it makes a lot of sense for Jordan Addison to go here at 21, and he's been rising on boards. He could go higher than this. He could end up being kind of like that Dolphins player. Wow, I'm blanking on his name. He's like one of the best receivers in the NFL. But he could end up being a guy that, like, just imagine Jordan Addison sprinting down the field, catching a bomb, blowing past the defense. Justin Herbert heaving a ball 50, 60 yards downfield, and Addison just taking it to the house. I could see that happening multiple times year one, and I think that would just make the Chargers offense that much more dangerous, and I think Addison would be a great pick here. That takes us to the Baltimore Ravens at 22. I think the Ravens are also looking to bolster their offense. They could go Smith or Branch or Van Ness. Maybe even Bresee, whatever. They could go Kincaid or Meyer. But ultimately, I think they are going to pick a receiver. I think they're trying to make Lamar happy, even though they're having a bit of a spat. I think they're trying to make him happy, and he's been unhappy with his receiver core pretty much since he arrived in Baltimore. So I think they would love Smith-Njigba. I doubt he would be here. I think they would love Jordan Addison. I think they would love Zay Flowers. I think if all three of them are off the board, I think they would even go Quentin Johnston. But Zay Flowers is on the board here. I think that's who the Ravens are going to go with. And you could see Zay Flowers making life difficult for defenses with him and Lamar and OBJ and who's it, Rashad Bateman. I think that gives them enough danger to be an offense that you do not want to have to prepare to play. Zay Flowers, receiver out of Boston College, catching tutties from Lamar Jackson next year. 23 overall, that takes us to the Minnesota Vikings. Now, this is also a trade down possibility. Allegedly, the Vikings are really into Hendon Hooker, based on recent reports that I've seen. So this could be a possible Hendon Hooker spot. This could also be a spot where the Vikings are like, hey, we know we want Hendon Hooker. This is a little high, though. We could trade back, get more assets, and still take a quarterback, Hendon Hooker. So that could happen. They could also go Nolan Smith or Lucas Van Ness. They're still on the board. They probably should be off the board by now. So they're definitely going to take a look at them. They could replace, I know they lost, I think it was an edge rusher, but they lost one of their big guys. So they definitely will be looking at them in this situation. But ultimately, I think the Vikings are going to want to be more dangerous because they won a lot of games last year. As most of us know, they were all like 1 to 3 point wins. They were very close wins. They could have easily lost a lot of games and not made the playoffs. And I think one of the main reasons for that was that Adam Thielen seemed to have like lost a step, and he was a little injury prone this year. So it was pretty much just Justin Jefferson was like the whole offense. I mean, the running back was solid. I can't think of his name right now, unfortunately. Dalvin Cook, he was solid. But Justin Jefferson was basically the whole offense. He's a beast. Kirk Cousins finds him every time. But they need somebody else to help him out. I think if Addison or Flowers were on the board, they would like to pick them. They're not going to go tight end. They just got one. But I honestly think this is a great spot for Quentin Johnston. I know a lot of people don't really like Quentin Johnston too much because he just makes dumb mistakes and he doesn't play to what his ability says he should be playing at. Because in theory, with his height and weight and body and skills, in theory, he could be a Justin Jefferson type guy. Like maybe that's a little too much because Justin Jefferson's like a monster. But honestly, with the way Quentin Johnston looks and the way that he can play, he could be that kind of guy. And I think for the Vikings, this makes a lot of sense because he would be number 2 to Justin Jefferson. He could learn from Justin Jefferson. And Justin Jefferson would take a lot of the heat off of him so he could make big plays too. So I think this is a perfect spot for Quentin Johnston to go. And while I'm not entirely sure, I think the Vikings would like him. I think that could make them a lot more dangerous. So Quentin Johnston, receiver out of TCU, to the Minnesota Vikings, and we have a run on receivers. Because that is the top 4 off the board, just like that. 21, 22, 23, 3 in a row. So we get to the Jaguars. They probably could have taken a receiver. They got a couple decent ones, but they could use another one for that offense. They'll look at Nolan Smith. I think Josh Allen might be in a contract year, so they'll look at Nolan Smith too, for sure. Lucas Van Ness, for sure. They'll probably look at Kincaid and Meyer a little bit here, because Evan Ingram's on the franchise tag, so they could use a tight end possibly. I could actually definitely see them taking probably Michael Meyer, maybe Kincaid, but I'd say Michael Meyer over him. But I think, and I've heard that basically everything that I've been looking up about the Jaguars, like more than half of the time, they're talking about Brian Branch. They really like this safety, and he could play nickel corner. And he played at Alabama, so hey, Alabama's always got good players. So that's ultimately what I think the Jags are going to do, and that really upsets me because the Giants are up next, and I want Brian Branch for the Giants or one of the receivers. So this would honestly be like a horror show for me as a Giants fan if I watch Addison, Flowers, Johnston, and then Branch go off in success right before the Giants pick. That would be a very bad time for me watching this draft play out. But that's how it's going right now. Brian Branch, safety out of Alabama, to the Jags at 24 overall. I think they really like that pick. And yeah, that leaves us with the Giants at 25. Now, the Giants just drafted edge last year. They have Thibodeaux. They have Akeem. I feel like I messed up that name. But they have their edge guys. And so I do think they could go edge, though, still. It's Ojulari. Yeah, they have Ojulari. They still could go edge. Nolan Smith and Van Ness. I mean, it wouldn't be bad to have a three-headed monster on edge. But I just don't think they're going to go this way. And Smith and Van Ness could fall. They're very talented, but they're also somewhat unproven, so they could fall. This isn't out of the realm of possibility. They could also go top 10. So who knows? I have them fallen. And I think for sure the edge class, there's a lot of good edge players, so I think they could drop. But yeah, I think the Giants, and they're going to be looking at corner, safety, receiver. I think those are the main three that they'll be looking at for 25. And literally all of them are off the board. All of them. Like, Smith-Njigba won't be there anyway, but like Banks, he could possibly be there. He's gone. Porter, he could possibly be there. He's gone. Addison, Flowers, Johnston, Branch, all gone. So I think the Giants are going to look at this and be like, wow, we don't really want any of these guys. Let's trade back now. And I think that's what they're going to do. They're going to look to trade back with one of these guys. And to be honest, I almost traded with the Eagles. I thought about it because I could see the Eagles moving up for Nolan Smith or Lucas Van Ness. They like both of them, and they like edge. I could see it happening. And they took Bijan Robinson, so they're basically due to take a defensive player. But it was a little too crazy. And the Eagles don't have like all that many picks, I don't think, either, so it didn't make all that much sense. It could be somebody coming from the second round too to trade up for one of these guys. But I decided that the Chiefs make the most sense in this situation. Now, if you listen to the Chiefs GM, was it Eric Berry, I think, something like that. If you listen to him, he's basically talking about possibly trading up. He kind of wants to trade up to get an edge rusher or possibly a different player that drops. But edge rusher is a big need for him. And with Nolan Smith and Lucas Van Ness both dropping, I think the Chiefs would love to trade up with the Giants here. Now, I don't think it'll be like a crazy haul that the Giants get, but they could get something. I'm just gonna do this. I don't really care. Like I said, because I'm only doing the first round, but they could get something. Like it could even be just a swap in like a later round or a third or second round swap of picks, something like that. It could be that. I don't know, but that's what I have going on. I have the Chiefs trading up, and then I was initially going to just pick Nolan Smith and be done with it, because in my head, Nolan Smith is the next best edge player. But digging a little deeper into the Chiefs and knowing Spags from the Giants, from his time with the Giants, we know that Spags likes a big, strong, mean edge rusher. Nolan Smith is underweight. Lucas Van Ness, he's 6'5". Nolan Smith's 6'2". Lucas Van Ness is a tank. And yeah, Lucas Van Ness could in theory be a bust, but this is a Super Bowl team. Lucas Van Ness, if he's drafted here, will have Chris Jones next to him to take off a lot of the pressure. I think Van Ness would be a great pickup here at 25 for the Chiefs, and I think he could be a monster in the future if they trade up for him. So that's what I ultimately went with at 25. Lucas Van Ness out of Iowa going to the Chiefs. And that takes us to the Dallas Cowboys. Jera World. I could definitely see him taking Nolan Smith. I could. Jera would probably love that he's still on the board here. But what we've heard out of Cowboys camp is that they are pinpointed on one specific player at 26 overall, and that they could even move up for him if they think they have to. And that player is Michael Mayer, tight end out of Notre Dame. I think he is damn near guaranteed to go to the Cowboys at 26 based on what we've been hearing. And it makes sense. They lost their tight end, Dalton Schultz, and Jera wants another big weapon for Dak. And it could be a receiver. I think Quentin Johnston could be a great pick here, to be honest. But they are locked in on Michael Mayer, and he could be a great tight end in the future of this league. He's a solid blocker, and he's a great playmaker. The only difference between him and Dalton Kincaid, there's actually a big difference. Dalton Kincaid is a ridiculous playmaker, but he's a terrible blocker. Michael Mayer can actually block. So yeah, Michael Mayer, tight end out of Notre Dame to the Dallas Cowboys at 26. Makes too much sense. They're talking about it. It's happening. That leaves us with the Buffalo Bills. I also thought about the Bills trading up with the Giants because the Bills could take an edge rusher or an O-lineman. But then I was like, they're 2 picks behind them, and Smith and Van Ness are both on the board. Why? Why would they trade up? I don't think they would have for that. So I have them sticking and picking, although they could trade. I think they've talked about it. And well, there's basically 3 options that I see here. I think this would be a great Bijan Robinson pick, but I highly doubt he'll be available still at 27. I think they do want a running back, so Jahmyr Gibbs honestly could be the pick here. We could get 2 running backs in the first. But I also think that they might like other running backs in the class too. So I don't think they're going to go with Gibbs. They could go receiver. They could. None of the big receivers are on the board, though, unless they want someone else. It could be Downs. Josh Downs has been going up boards. Jalen Hyatt's been going up boards. It could be him. He'd be a great pick for him, to be honest. He's quick. He's just very small. And then Cedric Tillman was the other guy I was thinking of. Cedric Tillman is honestly a kind of a monster. I love Cedric Tillman, and I hope he's there for the Giants' second-round pick. But ultimately, I think the Bills here, well, I think they would love to go offense because it seems kind of like they're just missing one piece on offense. Like, maybe they'll go Dalton Kincaid. That could work, honestly. And I think it's a very real possibility that they go with, like, an offensive weapon. I also remembered that one of the main reasons that they thought they lost to the Bengals was because Von Miller got hurt. So they're missing an edge rusher. That's like a big hole for them. And with Nolan Smith still on the board here, and with the Bengals picking right after them, I think the Bills would absolutely run to the fucking podium. Sorry. Oh, jeez, I didn't mean to swear there. But I think they would run to the podium to take Nolan Smith, the edge out of Georgia. And I think he could be a monster for this Bills defense. That is already really good. I think Nolan Smith could be a monster for them. And that's a great pick, in my opinion, to the Buffalo Bills at 27. That takes us to the Bengals. So there's a few players that the Bengals have been tied to. One of them being Dalton Kincaid, tight end out of Utah. The Bengals, they could use a tight end, and for whatever reason, Dalton Kincaid is a monster, monster on offense. He's not a great blocker, but and honestly, the Bengals kind of need blocking, so that would be kind of a strange pick. But he would also be a very dangerous weapon for Joe Burrow. So I like Dalton Kincaid here. The other player that I would consider in this scenario, well, I would consider O'Cyrus Torrence for sure. I would also, the Bills, I like O'Cyrus Torrence to the Bills too. I think there's a very real possibility Torrence goes to the Bills or Bengals as the first guard pretty much picked, although Skoronski's probably a guard. But I think the Bengals, seeing their opportunity for a Super Bowl, I think they're going to want to be as dangerous as possible. But then again, I think back to it, Dawand Jones could be the pick. Let's see what it says for them real quick. Corner, edge, tackle, guard, tight end, yeah. I don't think they're going defense. I don't. They could go Breesy. They could. I don't think they're going to go. Ringo's kind of been dropping. They could go Breesy. But I don't think that's who they want. I think they want offense. I think they want either protection for Burrow, which is huge, which they need. If one of the top tackles were still here, they would probably pick him in an instant. They're going to think about Dawand Jones. They're going to think about O'Cyrus Torrence. Ultimately, I think they're going to want the weapon. I think they're going to want Dalton Kincaid. I think they're going to pick, like they showed before when they picked Ja'Marr Chase over the Lions tackle in the draft, Sewell. They show that they want danger over protection. They choose violence. And Dalton Kincaid brings danger to this offense. So Dalton Kincaid, tight end out of Utah, to the Bengals at 28. And that's two tight ends in the first right there. That brings us to the New Orleans Saints. They could trade down. This is pretty much the Saints or Eagles. Possibly Chiefs, less Chiefs in my opinion, but the Saints or Eagles, I think, are the two spots that you have to really look at for Hendon Hooker for a trade down and somebody to come up like the Vikings or the Raiders, maybe the Titans, to trade up for Hendon Hooker. These are the two spots right here. But I don't have that happening. I think teams are going to get too scared away of his age and injury history to actually trade up or pick him in the first round. I think Hendon Hooker's going second round. So that being said, the Saints are going to stay at this pick, and they could go a couple different ways. They could go with Foskey. They could go with Breesy, Smith maybe, McDonald's a big name. Trenton Simpson, he's kind of dropped down boards. I don't think he's going to be picked in the first anymore. Dawand Jones, B.J. Ojulari, I don't think they'll go running back. Downs, maybe. O'Cyrus Torrence, he could be the pick here for sure. The Saints need a guard. It doesn't say they need a guard. I think they could use one, though. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. But D-tackle's a huge need for them, and Bryan Bresee, he is a tank of a player. He's a beast. He's a very good player. He just has very bad injury history. He could be a guy that is one of the best defensive players in the league in a few years, or he could be already on the second team within 2 years because he can't stay healthy, and then bounce around the league for like a few more years and then be done because he just is too injured. You don't know with him. But I think the Saints or someone else is going to take a shot. I think he's getting picked in the first round based on how good he has been in the past. And I think the Saints make a lot of sense for him. Bryan Bresee, a D-tackle out of Clemson, 29 overall to the Saints. We're almost done here. We got the Eagles' second pick. They took Bijan with their first pick. I think Eagles fans will love that. I will hate it. Now, with the second pick, I think they could go a few different directions, but ultimately, I think one of their main concerns, they could go O-line. They could go Cyrus Torrence. They love to pick O-linemen for the future, so that could definitely be the pick. But I really think they want to come away with one of these edge guys in the first round. And that's a big reason why I was really thinking about moving up when Van Ness and Smith were dropping. And I think they definitely could do that. But they didn't in this scenario. So I think they're going to be looking at Foskey. I think they're going to be looking at McDonald and Ojulari, maybe even Adebawore. Maybe even Felix Uzoma. Because they've been coming up the boards. They have been shooting up the boards, so they'll be looking at all of them. But there's one player out of that group that they have met with privately and that they allegedly really like. And this would very much hurt me, which the Eagles really like to do on draft day. So I'm going to have the Eagles take edge B.J. Ojulari out of LSU. That is the Giants' Azeez Ojulari's younger brother, and seeing him twice a year would just be painful. But it'd also be kind of cool because they would always talk about the Ojulari brothers. So I would kind of like that pick, actually. Because then they would be like stars every time the Eagles and Giants played each other. But I think that makes a lot of sense for the Eagles' second first-round pick. And, yeah, that's what I went with. So now we're going to finish up the draft with the Giants. They traded back with the Chiefs to get the 31st overall pick. And I think they would be very happy at this position to drop down here and possibly take a reach. But it makes so much sense to plug the biggest hole in the Giants roster. And that is John Michael Smith, the center out of Minnesota. He's a plug-and-play center. And people always talk about centers not being like worth a first-round pick. I don't understand that. They're an integral part of the offensive line. Why would you not want a plug-and-play center in the first round? You get a fifth-year option. Doesn't make sense to me, but that's how it is. So that's why they traded back. And I think John Michael Schmitz, if the draft falls like this and the receivers and Brian Branch are gone, John Michael Schmitz is the perfect pick for the Giants. They could just straight up take him at 25. They might not trade back. But John Michael Schmitz, I'm taking him. I'm not thinking too much more about it. So let's see the full results real quick. Yeah, so Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud, Will Levis, 3 quarterbacks right off the bat there. That might not happen like that, but I think it's very realistic. I think at least 2 are going right there. At least 2 in the top 4, rather. But I think 3 is realistic opportunity. Anderson and Carter. Carter could drop. I don't think he's going to. He's too talented. Seahawks or Lions are going to get him. Tyree Wilson, I think, is probably the next guy off the board, although Witherspoon or Gonzalez could go. They're next. And Paris Johnson, I think, is almost a lock for the Bears. Bijan, the Eagles are obsessed with him. Titans, Richardson drops to him. Smith and Jigba, first receiver off the board to the Texans. Makes too much sense to go there. Roderick Jones to the Jets. I like that. They could go Skoronski. Pats, Deontay Banks. It's a bit of a reach. Pats like reaching. Skoronski to the Packers. It makes sense to me. Darnell Wright. We got to run on the tackles. Joey Porter to the Steelers. Makes too much sense again. Kalijah Kancey, small reach. Would be great in that defense. Anton Harrison, bit of a reach. That's the Bucks for you. What are you going to do? Myles Murphy drops to the Seahawks. They're happy. Addison, perfect fit for the Chargers. Zay Flowers, Quentin Johnston, run on receivers. They all make sense to me. Branch to the Jags makes too much sense. Pisses me off a little. Van Ness to the Chiefs. That is a dangerous combo. Meyer to the Cowboys makes a lot of sense. Nolan Smith drops to the Bills. They're happy. Kincaid to the Bengals makes sense. Breesy, he's going to be a first rounder. Pencil it in. Ojulari, love him. Hate the pick to the Eagles. Kind of like it. And then John Michael Schmitz rounds it off. So that was the draft. My mock draft. I think that's very realistic possibilities there. I like these picks. Let me know what you think about them. If I picked somebody that you think your team's definitely not going to pick, tell me in the comments. If there's somebody still on the board that you think your team would have picked instead, or if maybe you think they're going to trade down or something, let me know. But I guess we'll see on Thursday. I think a lot of these picks could happen. The draft gets crazy, of course, every single year. I'm hoping I get like 7 or 8 of these picks right. I think that would be amazing if I got 7 or 8 of these picks right. So that's what I'm shooting for. That's a good number, I think. So yeah, until next time, thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.